welcome to another episode of The Buzzer Race. I'm your host, Nikhil Ranjan.
I'm your co-host, Zhang.
And for our guest today, we have Samir Apte, the 2015 NJCL Advanced Finals MVP. Welcome, Samir.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, so would you be willing to kind of introduce yourselves to the listeners, just some background information, name, former state as a JCLer, and then your favorite classical piece?
Yeah, I'm Samir Apte. I'm from Ohio. I grew up in the Cleveland area, so during my JCL days, I played for Shaker Heights High School and then the Ohio team. And my first convention was in 2011, and then my last one was 2015 at Trinity. So I went to 4 total national conventions, and now I'm in Boston studying cello performance at New England Conservatory. My favorite classical piece, it varies every day. Right now I'm listening to the Arensky Second Quartet because I have to prepare it, but I also really like the piece. So yeah, I've been listening to that.
All right, nice. Yeah, I mean, I am decently versed in the classical music realm, but I will now take a listen to that afterwards, so I'll have to let you know what I think about it.
All right, well, let's just jump into the questions. So obviously this is a podcast about Curtamen, and Curtamen's about Latin. So how did you first get involved into Latin during school?
Well, I had a group of friends in 5th, 6th grade. The Shaker Latin program didn't start until 7th grade. Our first classes for languages were offered in 7th grade. Because that was the beginning of middle school for us. We had sort of an upper elementary that went until 6th grade. And for some reason, we were really into the idea of speaking a dead language as code, which was, we were just really into that idea, and so we all ended up taking Latin. And I had a really wonderful teacher in 7th grade called Mrs. Ackerman. She's retired now, but she used to be really active in the Shaker. She used to go to state convention. She never went to nationals, but she was always there at state convention. Really, really supportive teacher. And I also just got really into the language itself. And that's basically what got me into doing it, doing the JCL.
So yeah, I think that's, a really common thread for people getting into the JCL. They have really, enthusiastic teachers that make you want to learn more Latin. Could you describe your first couple of years in the JCL and your introduction to Curtamen and stuff?
Yeah, it was actually funny because in Shaker, 7th graders don't do anything JCL. It starts in 8th grade. Latin club is exclusively sort of 8th grade thing. And it was funny, I actually missed the first meeting for something, and because I was like, what's the big deal? I like Latin, but what's the big deal with Latin club? It just doesn't seem to be very much about Latin, which obviously is not the case, but that was kind of the impression I got for some reason. And then when I heard about convention, I was just kind of like, why did I do this? So I went to the next meeting, and then obviously I got hooked on Curtamen, and I got hooked on the JCL in general by the end of my first state convention. So it was a pretty big turnaround.
What do you think interested you about Curtamen? What made you stick with it?
Oh, it was the competition. I mean, I'm competitive. I'm really competitive. So anything with competition is something I like. So that was really the element that drew me to it.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about some of your first tournaments in Ohio, in the local scene or the state scene?
Yeah, I actually never played a local tournament because I was doing music stuff on weekends typically, and I never had the chance to do anything else on the weekends. I remember my first tournament was states at 2011. I remember the first question I got, actually. It was, I think the answer, it was one of those verb questions where they ask you to give the first person. Yeah, it was first person plural, imperfect, active indicative of ambulo. So, ambulabamos. And that was my very first question. So.
Dang.
So, it's really cool that I think that's kind of weird to hear because in lots of the bigger Kurtaman states, there's a super active local scene. But it's
Right.
Really cool to see that you got so involved with basically just states and nationals.
Yeah, I think I only played 8 tournaments in my entire entire career. Yeah, it was, we would hang around at school and then sometimes go to people's houses and play questions. But in terms of actual tournaments, it was just states and nationals.
Wow, that is I have to say that is a pretty kind of unique thing, because usually people start in the there are very few people who I think start in their state tournaments pretty much as like their
Right.
first one, or even nationals for that matter.
Right.
But yeah, so you noted that your first question was kind of like a bird flip, and so I'm going to guess probably your favorite category was language.
Yeah, it was. I started out as almost like a pure language player, particularly. No, I think all of language was generally something I was really good at in my first couple years, and then when I came back after I took my sophomore year of high school off of the JCL for reasons we can get into later. But yeah, when I came back, I became a little bit more of a generalist and a bit more of in language a specialist on like short stuff, because we had a really really awesome translation person on the team, Will Beatrice, who you guys might know. But yeah, I was definitely more of a generalist when I came back. I had more myth knowledge, I had more lit knowledge, history, stuff like that. I never was a particularly high level generalist. Grammar and language was always my really strong suit. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I've just tried to. I answered whatever I could. I think. Yeah, I didn't really focus on one thing in particular.
So what kind of drew you to that generalist aspect? Because I know like some players, even even as like the years go on and like there is potential to pick up other categories, they'll just hone in on one and they are like, this is my dedicated category. What kind of led you to becoming a generalist? Did it just arise naturally?
Yeah, it sort of arose naturally. I mean, I was always somewhat of a generalist on lower level stuff. And most of it was absorbing from my friends in the Latin club, because we had a really good myth player and a really good history and culture player, and when you listen and practice, you can pick up some of those buzzes, and then you can pick up some of the clues, and if you know how to play the game, then you can sometimes beat those people to those clues, if you push the buzzer faster to them. And so I think it was largely stock clues, picking up on stuff like that. But I also had some real knowledge of, especially mythology and some history. I was always really into Roman history. So yeah, it was just sort of a potpourri of knowledge that I could draw on.
Okay, so yeah, that's like, I feel like it makes sense. I mean, because I did a similar thing when I played, where like I just kind of picked up other categories
Right.
just by listening. But it's cool to hear that like like the way within which you do it. I know some people will really just like be like, okay, I'm kind of putting a pause on this as a whole, and let me go pick up another thing. I'm confident this will kind of stay where it is. But like just kind of taking it as you go in is very neat. So I wanted to kind of just dive right into your like NJCL history now as a player for Ohio. So after 2012, I believe your intermediate year, you took a break from Kurtaman.
I took a break from the JCL.
Yeah, from JCL as a whole.
Yeah.
And you come back in like 2014, and I'm curious, like, so you come back from 2014.
Yeah.
You win Ohio States that year, I believe, and I'm curious, like, how do you do that, and what was like the kind of cause, if you're willing to discuss, about like what caused the break to take place?
Well, I was a disaster in high school organizationally, and I think I was doing way too much. I was trying to prepare for music. I was kind of torn between what I wanted to do. I had no clue what I wanted to do after high school. So I was, playing music. This was back when this was when I was really starting to get into the thought of doing music professionally. So I was thinking about that. I was also swimming on the varsity team, so it was like, that's a big commitment. That was maybe 14, 15 hours a week of that, and then also 14, 15 hours a week of practicing the instrument, which didn't actually end up being 14, 15 hours a week because I didn't have time. Not getting a lot of sleep, trying to do the whole rat race with AP classes and stuff. It's not good for you. It really, if people are watching this, don't recommend it. It really isn't worth it, and I spent a lot of time in college trying to, make myself healthier again mentally because of what I put myself through. But essentially, it was sort of to be honest, it was almost self-assigned. I was like, if I can't get my stuff together, I may as well, it's not, I don't deserve this, right? So it was kind of like forcing me to get more organized, and I didn't. So I took that off, and then came back junior year, and by then I was doing a little better. And I think that helped. I mean, I certainly had a clear sort of goal of what I wanted to do with my life then than I did in sophomore year.
That's really neat to hear. I think sometimes people just kind of are like, I'm going to keep pushing through it. They kind of decide, like, if I push through it long enough, the problem will get solved on its own. But like, I'm glad that you took the break. You like recognized like what was happening, and you're like, I'm going to take this break here.
Well, I mean, it was partially between my mom and I. I mean, my mom sort of realized what was going on and said, you can't go to convention. And I kind of agreed. I was like, this is a bad idea. I need to thin down what I'm doing because it was just too much. So, and Latin was, I have to say, it was something I really enjoyed, and it was something I was considering going into at that point. And so, yeah, I mean, just taking the time to focus and get my priorities straight actually made me, I think, be more into it and the JCL once I missed that. So yeah, I don't regret doing that at all. So.
I mean, yeah, I'm glad. I think it's a healthy decision. I think some people in Kurtamen burn out very quickly, very early on, because they're trying to do it, and a lot of Latin people are also doing so many other things, and they just kind of like go until, you just burn out. So.
Right.
2014, you won Ohio State's, but you didn't make the nationals team that year. And I was curious what that was kind of like. Did you, because you'd taken a year-long break, so like, were you like frustrated? Like, what was that?
I think I was a little frustrated. I think I remember being quite a bit frustrated. I didn't have a very good tryout, and the Ohio team, Alan, as you know, is all about. There's like one tryout, and then that's basically what decides. It's just a solo round in a room where buzz points are marked, and your total score is taken. And I just didn't do very well. But then I had a lot of fun at that convention. I think because that would have been Emory.
Yeah, 2014.
2014. Yeah. I remember having a good time because I didn't have anything to do with Kurtamen, and I could focus on other stuff and just have fun with people and. Get to see friends and stuff. So that was, I really didn't mind at the convention. I had a good convention. Like I felt I had fun, which is the most important thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me that was minor at that point.
So you mentioned this Ohio tryout system, and I don't know if you necessarily want to give your opinions on it, but I guess from like a perspective of like a different state, our tryout system is kind of like whoever, for nationals, whoever wins state is like the main team, but you can try out in Texas for these spots. And, kind of how you perform throughout, and you more or less have one tryout, which seems a bit, risky, like one tryout determining everything. Like, what are your thoughts on the Ohio system for going to Nats?
Oh, I mean, I'm a musician, so we do auditions, so one tryout determining everything is not an issue for me. I mean, that's how stuff works. I do think with Zoom, now that we have the ability to play Kurtamen over Zoom, it might be, a good idea to, and they may have done this already, I don't know what Mr. Dean is doing, but to be able to do tryouts over Zoom would, I think, be better, because then you can actually play people, right? It's not just, solo rounds where, they mark the buzz points, but I don't really think the buzz points were used that much. They just kind of, so you could buzz at the end of the quest and get everything right and get on the team. But I mean, you did need to demonstrate knowledge. Like everyone who ended up on the team, as you know, in 2015 when we got second, was usually very good. So yeah, it wasn't a bad system. I mean, obviously, you know, when you're 16 years old, you're sitting there like bawling, like, "Oh, it's so unfair," or something like that. But you know, looking back on it, it really wasn't that bad.
I kind of wanted to comment on this too because, you know, I've been through the same tryout process. And, you know, I think that the actual tryout itself is fair because, you know, there are questions and, you know, it's the same format as an actual Kurtamen basically. But I do think that there could be a little bit more preparation before that. I know Mr. Dean used to host like a Costra for Cincinnati people, but, you know, it's not like Columbus or Cleveland people are actually going to go down to that. And I just feel like in Ohio, there's not that much of a team connection until nationals. Would you say that that is kind of accurate?
That wasn't the case my year because I knew everyone on the team really well. I mean, I've known Jesse for like, Jesse and Tullis for 4 or 5 years. And we all had, and then the rest were from Northeast Ohio. So everyone on that team was, except for Jesse and Tullis, were from Cleveland.
No, dang, never mind then.
So yeah, things have definitely changed. I haven't been that involved, but I've heard some stuff, and yeah, it's definitely back to the usual like Cincinnati-centric world. But yeah, back then, and there were a lot of really strong Cleveland players.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you got second in 2015, so that's a nice way to go into it. So in respect to the national scene, you were gone for 2 years in terms of Kurtamen.
Yeah.
And how did you, so 2015, you come back, you win states, then you get to the nationals team, and you guys get second, you get the MVP. Can you just walk us through that, like, just that kind of like story and process for you? Because that's a pretty like crazy kind of story to come back into senior year.
Well, it was weird. I didn't really prepare that well, you know, for nationals, and because Jesse was on the team, and Jesse was a really strong grammar player. I don't know, Alan, if you ever got to play him or. But yeah, he was really good, and Tino was the coach that year, and Tino and Jesse had been working basically all summer on grammar stuff. And so we, you know, were doing preliminary practices on the first couple days of convention, and Jesse was just absolutely destroying me. And so I didn't get to start the first game, and it was Texas. And for some reason, there was some reason, and I can't remember, I was trying to remember over the last couple of days, why I didn't go to the first match. I think I had a Sight Latin, you know, reading or something, but for whatever reason I didn't go. I didn't see it, but it ended up being like 280-0 for Texas. And so Texas just absolutely steamrolls the team. And so they decided to put me in the next round, which I think was Illinois. I don't really remember. I think I got 6 in that round. And we put up like 200 or something. And then third round I sat, and Jesse played and did really well. And then the semis was, we pulled out an 8 seed, I think. And then the semis was Georgia and Illinois. And yeah, that was a fun game. We basically just got them to nag on every question, and picked up and vulged the end of the questions, and then we were up enough that it was we could play comfortably until the end, and we got to finals.
Yeah, and so what was finals like? 2015 was my first convention, so I got to see the ridiculous Texas versus Florida semis with like the 2.5 hour challenge waiting to and finals was really crazy to watch because first convention, seeing all these the top players in the nation playing. And what was that like for you playing that finals? Because you end up getting MVP this year, so what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was weird. I'd never been in a national finals before, so it was. I mean, the stage fright wasn't really anything. I play the cello, so it's not. But yeah, obviously they're nerves. Obviously it's not the most comfortable experience, and that Florida team was really good, and California was also really good that year. So I played conservative. We played conservatively that final. That final was not fireworks, if I remember correctly. I don't know what your impressions were in the audience, but it definitely wasn't like a crazy fast round. Everyone was holding back. I negged the first lit question. I think I got 3 grammar questions or something, or maybe it was 2 grammar questions and a myth question or something like that. I went 3 and 1 if I remember correctly. Yeah, I mean, I didn't think my performance was that strong, but I was surprised. I remember I was really happy about the second place, and then we got back to the seats in the award ceremony, and people just started pushing me forward, and I like looked back and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, you're MVP. And I'm like, what? So it's like,
That's a really interesting perspective to hear, because a lot of times you don't get to hear, what are people's thoughts on how they did. You just know that they did, they got something, they like won something. But that's really funny to hear that, you weren't really thinking much about it. You're like, I did all right. I'm not like super impressed. I mean, from the audience, I think 2015 advanced finals. I mean, I was novice, so I was already,
right.
regardless how fast this fight was, I was already like, what is happening? Like, this is crazy. I remember that round being pretty interesting in the beginning, though, for sure, because I think the first half was like a really, really tight. Like, it was like
it was close. It was close because California got the first question. It was. I feel really bad for not being able to remember his name. They had a history player that was quite good. And I cannot remember his name for the life of me. If someone could add it in edits, I'll try to see if I can find his name. I'm pretty sure.
Was it Nozick? Was he there?
No, Nozick wasn't on the... Nozick may have been on the team. It was Sean, Liz Siegel. It may have been Nozick. And then there was another guy, and I can't remember for the life of me. I can picture him perfectly in my head, but I can't remember for the life of me what his name was. He got the first toss-up, and then I negged Nigidius Figulus. And and then it was just back and forth, like tight stuff. And this was like the first year they did the whole like groups of 5 questions, which I really hated. They like organized all the questions in groups of 5. Like you'd get one, each category would be each 5 questions would have one of each category in it, which I really didn't like. I do remember it being tight.
Yeah, that's. I didn't realize that it was that recent. Because I think it's pretty standard now to have because you can count questions pretty much.
It makes it easier to count questions. Yeah. Back then, I remember when I played novice and intermediate, the math guys would have this chart that they practiced drawing really fast on the paper, and you had to count all 20 questions. It wasn't like you could count questions within the 5, within each quarter of the game. So the concept of quarters is relatively new.
Yeah, that is really interesting because it was my first year. So right. I was like, oh yeah, I mean, just count. You'll know what's coming in the last quarter.
Right.
That's interesting that it became only more standardized as of 2015, which is weird to think about.
Yeah, that was the first year.
Yeah. So after playing 4 years of Kurtamen, did you have any I guess not did you but what were your thoughts and opinions on the game? Did you have anything you were like, I wish this had been done or not done while playing, that type of thing? Were there anything specific you were like, I wish this had been done while I was playing?
Not particularly after I finished playing. My opinion of the game was pretty high. I think it was when I started playing Quiz Bowl in college. That I kind of thought about some things, and Michael Kearney and I have been texting about this because he's now in, he's very high up in Quiz Bowl now. He's doing a lot of organizational work with ACF, which is one of the Quiz Bowl federations. And, we were just talking about, various elements of Kurtamen and what we thought of them. But, I like the game. I like the way that it really hasn't changed through, 65 years. If you look at Quiz Bowl, it's changed way more than Kurtamen has over the years. And to me, I think the most important part of it is the competition. Like, if you look at convention from the point of the JCL is to have this, pride in a classical education, right? So it doesn't matter if Kurtaman is fair. I think, like, for example, maybe fair is not the right word. Like, so I don't know how much you guys know about Quiz Bowl, but in Quiz Bowl there's like pyramidality, which is like the harder clues are at the beginning, and so the better team always wins in Quiz Bowl, and I think we all know that really is not the case sometimes in Kurtaman. There's an element of luck, there's an element of guessing, there's an element of that. But if you look at top level Quiz Bowl, it's quite boring to watch, whereas Kurtaman is really, really exciting to watch when you're in a finals or something. And so I think it's that sort of spirit of friendly competition and competitiveness, because if it's not competitive, then it doesn't fit those, sort of ideas of the classical world. So obviously I think there are ways you can make Kurtaman a little more, I don't know what the word is, but like not fair, but
like balanced.
Yeah, there's it's less balanced. There's a word like separating. Like if you want Kurtaman to separate the top teams, which you can in the prelims. Obviously, most of the time the best team wins, but you could make it a little more fair. But by introducing longer questions, maybe making it 2 teams instead of 3. But would that, would that defeat the purpose of Kurtaman as an activity at convention? And I don't think it would improve that. I think if you make Kurtaman more cutthroat than it is, which again it is competitive, but it's not, everyone knows each other, everyone is friendly, people who play are generally like really awesome people, there's no bad blood out there, it's all in good fun. So yeah, I think it's good the way it is, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean Alan, you want to go? Oh, okay. I mean, the pyramidality of Quiz Bowl has been coming into Kurtaman more and more with Kearney, because Kearney's been adopting a lot of
right.
Question writing styles, obviously from Quiz Bowl.
Yeah.
So a lot of like the innovations are Quiz Bowl-esque in their origin, and I think personally, I think that the pyramidality is kind of a good thing for Kurtaman, just because I think with some of the questions in the past, like quality has been kind of interesting, where like really like you would think, like, I guess in the current stage of the game, certain clues that are like that would formerly be asked as like lead-ins would be just kind of like a bit like, it would be like, maybe that's a later clue. I don't think it's like the first clue you want to put in, because like buzzer races are such a brutal thing in Kurtaman sometimes, where it's like you think you have that buzz on like this you're like, I know this, and then someone beats you, and it's just like, and it's just like the first couple of words.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you know what? I was gonna say, I think that's nice, but there's something about the amount of buzzer races in Kurtaman that makes it really exciting. And it's like, if you watch again a high level like ACF Quiz Bowl matches, it's really boring. Like, you'll see, half the time it's the question's answered at like the end, like for 10 points or whatever, and it's just really, really boring to watch, and the players are like, they're just like yawning, and like it's just the tournament is beating them. But when you watch like formats that have a lot more, buzzer races and competitiveness, buzzer races introduce competitiveness, right? You want to see the players react from an audience viewpoint. Sure, it's not fair, it's less fair to the players, but from an audience viewpoint and from, a competitiveness viewpoint, it's much better. So I think there is a balance, right, between making the questions more fair and more, accurate with the player's knowledge. Like, obviously, don't put in bad lead-ins and stuff. But I would, for example, I would hate to see the tournament absolutely kill the players in Kurtaman. It should be a player show, not the packet wins.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of what Quiz Bowl at the college level seems to look like a lot. And I think for the most part, I mean, Alan can weigh in as a more recent player. I think it hasn't gotten there, and I hope it doesn't. I mean, Alan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Kurtamen is slowly becoming more and more knowledge-based because, as you were mentioning with like really common lead-ins, I don't think that there are any questions nowadays that start off with like, what law of 326 BC? Because everyone has memorized all that sort of stuff. Um,
Right.
but, there has been somewhat of a trend to starting with really difficult lead-ins and going easier and easier, but the answers lines still aren't like incredibly easy. I think that they're still trying to maintain a sense of difficulty
Right.
that makes it difficult. So
Yeah.
I think there will always be, at least on the present trend, that sort of competitive spirit, even if it's not so high.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not trying to say, those old lead, like, your Gaius Stern type lead-ins are going to be are good for the game, or any hoses or stuff, because that's unless you're writing a fun packet, that stuff is just not good. It's not good for Quizbowl, it's not good for Kurtamen, it's not good for anything. But I do agree, like, keep the questions short, keep it viewer friendly, keep it there's a way to do that and still make it pyramidal and difficult. And the point should be that the audience in the NJCL should be able to, people should be able to go out there and demonstrate that they know stuff, right? And it should be a wow sort of thing. I'm talking about it from an audience perspective, and from a player perspective, that's fair too, because something like NAQT, if you guys know what that is, something like where it's pretty fair from a player perspective, and then it's also way more fun to watch because the clues are way more competitive, and it's interesting. As for the 3 teams versus 2, I've vacillated back and forth on this personally. I think it introduces some chaos to the game that's, 1, unfair, and 2, it's kind of exciting and introduces some cool strategy. So I don't really have an opinion on it. I think it's kind of interesting, but it's also, of course, not the most fair situation.
Yeah, the two teams versus 3 teams like been an interesting conversation from because I did Quizbowl first in middle school before I did Kurtamen, and 3 teams always seemed a bit weird. But I liked the influence of a 3rd team in matches. Like, for example, one I remember very clearly is 2018 NJCL Advanced Finals, very contentious finals, and it comes down to the last toss-up being between Massachusetts and Virginia, and Florida, and Massachusetts is up by 5 points or something,
right.
And Florida secures the final toss-up.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And tragic moment for Virginia, but it's it's interesting to see that kind of influence that having that 3rd team has, as opposed to just a one-on-one complete shootout. There just isn't any I think a 3rd team adds a nice balance to also 150 in a 2-team match isn't really as big as 150 in a 3-team match.
Right.
The influence of what it means to get toss-ups changes a lot in a 3-team versus 2-team, I think is very cool.
Yeah, each toss-up is way more valuable when you're up against 12 people, as opposed to, it's like playing in a room. If you're just playing in practice, it's much more similar to just playing in practice when you have 3 teams out there than when it's 2 teams, and then it becomes a much more defensive game. And I think the last thing we want in Kurtamen is for it to become a defensive game, because it's Kurtamen, of course. It has the word in Latin has this kind of implication of attack. It has this sort of engagement, aspect. And the last thing you want is for it to become boring. So
I think hearing about your philosophy on the structure of the game and the structure of the questions is really interesting. And I know that you've written a couple of packets for Kurtamen since you've been in college, but generally you haven't been that involved in the JCL scene, as you've said yourself. So what have you been up to post your JCL career?
So in terms of my involvement in the JCL, I just remembered today, actually, right after my my last convention, I made the Kurtamen Facebook group. I just remembered I made that group. Yeah. So obviously that's not a big thing, but that was me. And then I contributed a couple questions to 3 or 4 packets. I wanted to come back and volunteer at a convention, but music festivals are in the summer, and I've gone to one basically every year since since I was in college, like starting freshman year. I've been studying at various music festivals, so I could never make it to convention. I do want to come back someday and, maybe chaperone the Ohio team or something and help out with Kurtama, and that would be, I think that would just be really, really fun. As for what I was doing, I basically transitioned full-time to Quiz Bowl at the beginning of my freshman year. I just kind of showed up to the practice, saw I was pretty good. The vice president on the team at the time was a former Kurtaman player. Oh. So he would trash talk Kurtaman, and it was kind of funny. It was a lot of fun. I played for 4 years. We went to ACF Nats twice, never did very well. But I had a lot of good times with that team, and wrote a couple packets in Quiz Bowl. I was pretty okay. I was 18th, I think, overall in ACF Nats 2019. So I was a pretty fair Quiz Bowl player. I was, again, sort of this generalist. I had specialties in classical music and mythology and actually a lot of classical subjects, but I also had a lot of general knowledge, and I think, I was about I think I had 35 PPG at ACF Nats my last year. So I was, it was pretty good. But yeah, no, it was a very different scene in Quiz Bowl for sure. I have to say, I thought the Kurtaman competitions were a lot more fun, a bit just because it was part of the JCL convention, but I did enjoy Quiz Bowl a lot.
Yeah, I think that's really impressive. 18th is no easy feat. And I think that there's a fair overlap between the Kurtaman community and the Quiz Bowl community, even though that the games are really so different, even though they appear on the surface to be pretty similar. Right. Do you think that your background in Kurtaman helped you prepare for Quiz Bowl and really like anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think, my strength at Kurtaman and my strength at Quiz Bowl, one of them was the metagame, knowing the game and how to play the game. I always was much better at Kurtaman than I was at any of the academic tests, I would definitely outperform myself on the tests in Kurtaman because I knew when to buzz, I knew some stock clues, I knew that stuff. And it was much the same in Quiz Bowl. I knew the game quite well. Even if I didn't put in, I was full-time into music at that point. So it was like, I didn't have that much time to put in work. But I would do a little studying and then try to let my instincts take over, and did quite well.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about getting into Quiz Bowl again. We'll see whether I do or not. I mean, I think the JCL scene is a lot more, I think it's the, friendliness of the environment. I mean, nothing against Quiz Bowl, but,
no.
I think there's a different sense in the JCL than there is in Quiz Bowl.
Well, I wanted to talk about that, actually, because the JCL, I mean, it's just, I think in terms of the character of people who do it and compete, and it's just full of really awesome people. I have to say that, and it's full of people who are supportive, who are friendly, who are and still competitive, and also, people who, really passionate, interested in a lot of other things, and I can't say I've met a lot of really wonderful people through Quiz Bowl, but I can't say of the larger Quiz Bowl community that the same really holds true. I mean, the thing about the JCL is there's, virtually zero toxicity because of this, classical mindset. If anyone shows any sort of toxicity, it's dealt with immediately. There's no issues with dealing with that. It's run by adults who love to see their pupils succeed. And so they're always really looking out for you, trying to do the best for you, and also your friends are trying to do the best for you, right? And so if you're struggling to make friends or something, people will help you, right? And then and if you're being if there's an issue, people will talk to you, they will sort out the problem, they will and then you do that to the people who you are mentoring too when they're younger. It's a really good support structure that the JCL has, and you learn to respect everyone no matter what they're doing in the JCL. What they have done or accomplished. It's not about that. It's not about that. It's about who you are as a person. It's about developing who you are. It's never about the numbers or the placings or anything, but it's still competitive, and that's what I loved about the JCL.
Yeah, I think that's a very good assessment of the JCL and what makes it so wonderful, and I think what brings so many people back, like even after post-fac, because you want to kind of give back to this community that's given so much to you while you were a student. So yeah, I was just wondering, do you have any like advice that you would like to give to people that you wish you'd either gotten coming into Kurtaman in the JCL, or maybe just something you yourself like over like self-reflection and just kind of thought about it, or like this is something I wish people knew and kind of could use or do with?
Yeah, I've thought about this over the past couple of days because you put this down. I think my advice for people trying to get better at the game is look bigger rather than smaller, if that makes sense. I think the best thing you can do, we do this in music when you're preparing for auditions, right? You can get better at your instrument, right? And then you can also focus on the small things about the excerpts and stuff that you're playing. So I think in terms of, like, for example, in grammar, I think the most important thing that helped me, rather than, maybe I never reached my full ceiling because I never studied a lot of the small things in grammar, but I always tried to get to know the language better. And I think that's something that more people could do, is really try to become fluent or have some sort of, get more comfortable with the Latin language. I think if you get more comfortable with the Latin language, get more comfortable with like the whole story of mythology or the story of Roman history rather than trying to memorize dates or stuff, or, I think if you get to have that sort of picture in your mind, it becomes a lot easier to fit that stuff in. And, maybe that raises your ceiling, right? Then you can work up to it. I think sometimes I see people just trying to memorize dates or going through Conti with Latin literature, and sometimes I was guilty of this, not reading the sources. I think if you engage with the material and try to see the big picture of things, that opens up so much more, and it's a more enjoyable experience than just trying to blindly memorize facts and stuff.
Yeah, I think looking big rather than small is a very nice way of putting it. I mean, I think a lot of people try to get too lost in the small facts, like, oh, I know this really obscure thing,
right,
but what does it do for you if you don't have the story down, right? Like, you don't know where to place it, you don't know the significance of it. And I think that's a really good point, because the small things you can always just flashcard to oblivion and eventually have down. But, like, the bigger picture is something you have to synthesize through a lot of reading and stuff.
Yeah, and I think in terms of, Kurtaman competitiveness and something, I mean, I think most people actually in Kurtaman are pretty conscious that, it's not the end of the world. But, I mean, then again, obviously we're playing this when we're, 12 to 17, right? So you're going to have your frustrated moments. I mean, it's a frustrating time of life. Looking back on it now, how many years down the road? It is 6 to 10 years down the road. Obviously, your reactions to, your misses are going to be, they're not going to be what you want, right? But my advice is for people who are coming to convention and are really excited to play Kurtaman, don't look up. Don't make that, the sole focus of your convention. I don't think it's as big a problem as it is, for example, in Quizwell. But, yeah, I think if you just try to have fun, you only get 5 days at Nats. Make something out of every one of them. And for me, States was always really fun, and it was only 2 or 3 days, but it felt like a month. So, yeah, I would just encourage people to do as much as they could. I think sometimes Kurtaman players don't. I definitely wish I'd gone to the symposia and stuff like that they offer at convention, like the Rio Classics, stuff, because that stuff always seemed really interesting, and I never went to it because I was just taking tests all day and doing Sight Latin and stuff like that and seeing friends. But I mean, obviously you can't do everything, but I would encourage people who are to maybe take off a test that you don't think you're you have a great chance of doing. We all have that one test or 3 tests or 5 or 10 that you just have no chance at, right? And you haven't prepared for. Why struggle through that when you could go either, see a friend from another state or, get a coffee or something, or like go to a symposium or do some fun art project or something like that. I just think people, I wish I'd been more into more stuff, because as you get into college, then you realize, oh, I was just trying to do so much in high school. Life is so much better when you're not trying to do that much. I know there's a lot of pressure, but especially now when we have the virus and we can't do everything. I think this will come around because people will see the benefits of having free time in your day and having a diverse yet balanced sort of slate of stuff that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I think that's something I've also thought about in I wish I had gone and done more things, because when you're a Kurtaman player or even just a tester, there's not that much free time, because you're going to be freaking out about oh, I need to review, I have to make this test, I have Kurtaman at this time, I need to somehow fit in eating food, I need to
right.
you don't have that much time to socialize. And I think that's a big thing that JCL offers, is especially meeting people across the nation.
Yeah,
it's just such a unique experience, I think, that not many people get.
Well, I have to say, especially in my last couple years, I think that, I never really studied much at convention. If I did study, I wasn't a big studier in general. I would read for pleasure. I would read about this stuff because I was interested in it, and I would read some grammar stuff maybe the week before convention or something. So that's always been my studying atmosphere. I've never really, even in Quiz Bowl, I never really, I just, basically absorbed stuff from what I was interested in. And yeah, I mean, my first couple years I was hanging out with friends from high school mainly, but then the 4th and 5th years I got to meet some people from all around the country, and I always tried to make time to socialize with people. And I have to say, especially in the last 2 years, meeting people and hanging out with people from all over was definitely the highlight of convention, as opposed to any of the awards or stuff for me. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love to hear it. I think it's good. I don't think as many people capitalize on it, and I'm glad that you got to do that. And I think more people should. Well, I guess whenever a convention comes back in person. So yeah, that's pretty much everything we have on this episode of the Buzz Race. Thank you so much, Samir, for coming on and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to listen to. So yeah. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks. See you.